Welcome to Going Beyond, and I'm so glad that you could join us. And joining us in our studio today is Sabrina Siga. Now, Sabrina is very well known all over India for her magnificent paintings, and her artwork has really traveled around the world. And she's right here in our studio with us because there's a very big exhibition going on in the city right now, and Sabrina's work is on display and drawing a lot of attention. Sabrina, first of all, thank you for coming in here. Now, how old were you when you actually began to paint?
Well, painting as such, it was, I was told I was very talented in school, and I used to win the annual art prize at school, boarding school. But getting into the field of equine art was when I was 22, when I got married and I settled in Delhi.
Okay.
My husband was passionate about horses. We got off the train, I think after 2 days traveling from Trichy all the way to Delhi, and there I was so, sort of exhausted, but he took me straight away to the stables and said, these are my horses, and Trishul, this is he was so, he just wanted to show how close he was to these animals, and I think he wanted me to be as passionate about these animals like him.
Of course, and your husband John was a brilliant polo player in the Indian Navy, and I suppose really that's where his love for horses actually began, and then that was translated to you. So was it easy, or is it easy in fact to be to be painting and an animal? Do you actually have to watch the animal? Do you have the animal in a certain position? How does it work for an artist, Sabrina?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that when I'm painting something that is three-dimensional, and that to an animal, that to an action, it is up to me how to put that onto a two-dimensional through line and pigment onto a canvas or onto paper. So it's up to the ability of the artist. It's how I observe, that all counts. So I used to do a lot of observation because this was new to me.
Of course.
So sitting there at the stables while he used to train, the polo ponies, whatever were animals left behind in the stables, I used to sit early morning at around maybe 5:30 in the morning. Delhi cold winters, but I used to sit there and paint each and every the different hooves, and he used to teach me the various bits and things. So I used to draw these just for, it was as a pastime in the beginning. Then I had one Colonel Brijender who told me, he says, why do you want to work for others? Because I was wanting to pick up a job. He said, show me some of your work. And he said, there's no one who does equine art the way you do. They do horses, which are just horses. You can recognize them as horses. But then it was my choice to do it in a realistic style. It's up to an artist which line and how they want to translate that animal onto the canvas or the watercolor. So I did it in the realistic style.
But having said all of this, do you ride? Do you like horses, Sabrina?
I love horses.
Really?
And John made it a point to teach me to ride. That makes a big difference, when you've ridden, you are in love with that horse, and at that point of time that every horse is not the same.
Really?
It's not. It's like dogs, there are some which are very naughty, some which are very mild, some you can see the emotion in the eyes. That's why for me, horse portraits, the head of the horse that I do, I love it. That's my favorite.
As you speak, I can almost imagine that you're telling me that a horse is like a human being.
Very much so.
Is that true?
Yeah. So when people start riding or they start playing polo, it becomes like an addiction. They just are in love with the animal.
Yes.
And for John, when you said he was into polo, actually a friend of his, Keith, was telling me just recently in Pune, he said when the rest of them would finish, a 30-mile hike or whatever it was with all their thing in training as cadets, they used to come back and just flake out on the beds, in their rooms. But John would get ready and go and start training.
This is amazing. And of course, we are talking here about when John was a very young cadet at the Defense Academy.
Okay.
So that's where the love of all this really began, right?
Very
And then, of
true.
course, he passed it on to his wife. And then what about your children?
Both of them ride very well. My son, in fact, used to jump, and
Really?
till he had a fall, and I never used to go and watch him because I was terrified,
Scared.
scared
Yes.
that anything can happen. And he used to do jumps. He was around 4 foot nothing, and he was doing jumps which were 4 foot.
It's almost scary to me because I am not a horse lover, I must confess. And when you speak like this, I'm kind of almost taken aback. So when you actually started painting horses, were you ever and never tempted to do any other animals, dogs, cats, anything else?
I was, and it was surprising because people said you can bring out the the emotion of these animals, and that's when people came to ask me if I could do dogs as well, because I started exhibiting in London. And there they are all dog lovers. The
Of
British
course,
are very
indeed,
much.
yes.
So then my the agent there asked if I could do dogs. So I started doing dogs. In Delhi, I used to sit and sketch, people who have dogs at home. I used to sit and sketch them and then come back to the studio and do it, just as I did with horses.
Right. Of course, here I'm talking to a very well-known painter, and I know you're kind of modest as you come across. But I do know from my experience and knowing you and your family that your horses and the paintings of your horses are in pretty much every palace probably around this country. So let me talk to you about actually dealing with people who own these kind of stately homes. Are these the real people who would want to source something like yours, especially horses, or would you actually have to paint their horse?
Many of them like their horses painted. It's like the Rajmata, the late Rajmata of Jaipur. She wanted her stallion and her broodmare, which she had imported into India, and she watched me while I sketched them, and I gave it to her. But there are others who would just like to have a painting of a horse in action, or just a horse, because somebody once said that the horse is one of the noblest of all of God's creatures, the animals that He has created. The horse is the noblest. It served man during war. It has served mankind during peace as well. And someone went so far as to say, if we had still had the horse, we wouldn't have so much pollution.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting thought, and I'm going to ask you to hold on, Sabrina, because I need you to explain that to me, uninitiated as I am. Time for us to take a very short break here and Going Beyond. We'll be right back with you. Please don't go anywhere.